Game week 22 just ended. I got 6 points. Not a good week. Taking me to a total of 130 points. This week we kick off with Brighton versus Everton. Brighton, who went against United. It was an easy game for them. Nothing to struggle about. All their players performed well. They didn't stand out, but that's because United wasn't doing anything. And then there's Everton, who beat Spurs surprisingly 3-2. They scored 3 goals in the first half. Easy game for them in the first half, but then they slipped up. Calvert-Lewin had a great goal. Finally, he did something. I feel like he's a player that is cheating life because he is not a good soccer player or football player, in my opinion. As for the scoreline for this game, it's going to be at Brighton's home. Everton are scoring a bit under Moyes, but it's not going to be enough. I'm going to go for a 3-1 win to Brighton. Next up is Liverpool versus Ipswich. Liverpool beat Brentford, but they did struggle with it. Their attackers especially, they couldn't really do anything. Salah hasn't really been Salah for a couple games now. He's slowing off a little bit, but they still won 2-0 thanks to Nunez. I think it's safe to say that Liverpool are the champions for this season. They are playing like a champion squad. Every player is contributing to the season and putting their own part. That even Nunez scored a brace for them to save them 3 points here. And on the other side, we have Ipswich, who had a horrendous game, conceding 6 to City. This variation of City is not acceptable. One guy who really had a bad game was Godfrey. He just got to the team. I think that was a part of the game plan for City to attack his side because he just got to the Prem. This was his first match after being sent away from Everton. He's back now at Ipswich, and he got cooked. As for this matchup, Liverpool will have a Champions League game to play, so they're going to be resting some players. So I don't think they're going to be smacking Ipswich as much, but it's still going to be a high number. 4-0 for me. Southampton versus Newcastle is next. Southampton went against Forest, which they did give them a headache in the second half through set pieces. That could be Forest's weak point. I didn't know. But Southampton got a goal through a free kick. Bednarek flicked his leg, and the ball went over Sells. And then Unuachu, finally, 6'8", absolute beast, finally got a header for once, which I should be expecting a little bit more from him than from headers. They nearly had a comeback, but it just wasn't enough for them, and they still lost the game. As for Newcastle, they got obliterated by Bournemouth. So many of their players had off games, especially the players in the midfield. Very sloppy, very just not put together. I think it was a game of management more than anything for this matchup. It was just Eddie Howe couldn't beat Areola, and I feel like this will slow down their momentum. They've been on a hot streak, and this should be slowing it down. But they'll win this game. I'm gonna go for a 2-0 win to Newcastle. Next up is Wolves versus Arsenal. Wolves losing to Chelsea. This is now the third game that they concede 3. Chelsea, Newcastle, and Forest now. And it looked like Cunha is done with the team. He looked irritated. He didn't like the passes. He didn't like the decision making. I feel like he's going to be leaving in the summer. As for Arsenal, they drew against Villa. It looked easy for them in the first half and a little bit of the second half. But then somehow Villa woke up and came back at them. But for Arsenal, Trossard had a good game in my opinion. Once again, someone who I think gets too much hate. And then someone who deserves hate, Havertz, for claiming that goal that came off his hand. That is shameless work from him. All that does is give false hope to everyone else around you. And then it got caught off by VAR, and he looked like a clown. But for this game, Arsenal should be winning. Wolves aren't that hot. I'm going to go for a 3-1 win to Arsenal. Next up is Bournemouth versus Forest. I think this is possibly the best game of the week, or at least one of them. Bournemouth having a masterclass against Newcastle, scoring 4 against them, and 3 of them came through Kluivert, getting himself another hat trick. This time, none of them were pens, and they were all pretty decent goals. Just great from Bournemouth. Every week they're performing at an 8 out of 10. And then there's Forest, who should have put the game away in the first half, but they got the scare through set pieces. But it was enough. The 3 goals were enough, and they got their 3 points. They haven't slowed down. But this game against Bournemouth, I see them slowing down because it is at Bournemouth's home. I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw. Next up is City versus Chelsea. City finally got a great result, a City result, 6-0. That's what we were supposed to be doing against teams like this, and we finally did it. Great performance from a lot of the guys. Foden finally getting some goals, putting his name on the score sheet. But I won't get ahead of myself. We still have a game against PSG tomorrow, I think, and we're most likely going to lose that. I feel like this is just a little treat for us because we've been struggling. As for Chelsea, they beat Wolves, expected. Chalobah's back because they recalled him back from Crystal because they couldn't get Gahey. Very petty from them. Madueke scoring against Wolves. I feel like the last time he scored was against Wolves, and that was a hat-trick. Very petty from him. Chelsea, very petty in this game, but they did concede through Sanchez. Another blunder for him. I feel like he's another player that's going to be leaving or being replaced in the summer. As for this game, Chelsea have European competition as well, but it's Conference League, so who cares? City are going to have to rest some players. I feel Chelsea is going to take this one. I'm going to go for a 2-1 win to Chelsea. Next up is Spurs versus Leicester. Spurs losing to Everton. Terrible performance. I feel like you can't blame them that much because of all the injuries they have. I feel like the injuries are going to be the end of Postecoglou. It's just too much at this point. And then they still have European competitions as well. They have Europa League. And honestly, I feel like they might lose another defensive player during that game, whoever they play. As for Leicester, they had a decent game, but they just can't finish again. That's the second week now where they do all right, but they can't finish. But against Spurs, the depleted Spurs, I feel like they could do it. I'm going to go for a 2-1 win to Leicester. Next up is Crystal versus Brentford. Crystal beating West Ham with 2 Mateta goals. Mateta is now on 8 goals, so he has like half of what he had last season. You know, he's still doing his thing, and I think he's going to continue. Then we have Brentford, who played Liverpool, conceded twice. They were doing good, but they just couldn't keep the clean sheet towards the end. Last couple minutes, they were there, but just messed up. As for the scoreline, Brentford is going to be away at Crystal Palace's home, and Brentford away aren't that good. So I feel Crystal is going to win this one. Mateta is going to have something to say. I'm going to go for a 2-1 win to Crystal. Next up is Villa versus West Ham. Villa, like I said, drew to Arsenal. They didn't look good in the first half, but somehow a second win came in the second half, and they came back and scored twice. Tielemans is the guy who I wanted to shout out in this game because he was the one that changed it. He's the one that scored the first one. He nearly got the second one, and he was the one that was starting all the counterattacks or leading all the counterattacks, which eventually gave them the second one. So great game from him. As for West Ham, I just don't know what to expect yet with this Potter team. They lost 2-0. They haven't had a great game. They had a decent game against Villa the first time, but other than that, not great. They beat Fulham, but it was more luck than anything. Now they're going to get the rematch, but I don't think Potter's going to do it. I think Villa's going to beat them again. I'm going to go for a 2-0 win to Villa. And we have the last game of the game week, Fulham versus United. Fulham beating Leicester. They had a great team chemistry. A lot of their plays were just passing up the field, and it was beautiful, and it gave them 2 goals. It was a big improvement from last week where they had mistake after mistake. And as for United, they lost to Brighton. Honestly, United are starting to be that second Spurs team. I just don't know what to expect from United. They had great games against Arsenal and Liverpool. Then they lose to Brighton at home. It just doesn't make sense to me at this point. But someone who deserves a shout out is Xerxes, who has had a rough time here, but this is another good performance from him. Very tricky player. Hold up play is great. Just deserve the shout out. I do think Fulham should be winning this one, but with United, you never know. So it could be close. I'm going to go for an exciting 3-2 win to Fulham. So those are my Game Week 23 predictions. Tell me what you think in the comments. Watch my Game Week 22 predictions, and like, subscribe, and thank you for watching.